What would each of you say are perhaps, let's say, the two biggest challenges to kind of improving education within your country?
The first one is leadership, and the second one is leadership. It's just leadership, leadership. That's what it is. And I say this to my alumni, I say this to our fellows and every supporters. Like, if you, for instance, if I walk into the district director's office in any district in Ghana, the way the office is managed gives me a fair idea of how the classrooms in that particular district look like. Because if that office is not managed well, it trickles down all the way to the classroom, because that's where the policy and things are designed. And each time you walk into certain offices and boardrooms, you can just tell there's this culture of, the deep level of care for kids, or even thinking long enough to say, look, where do we want our countries to be in the next 20 to 25 years? It's almost like you don't feel that hope or optimism. The other thing I also noticed that you don't see a lot of young people too in these rooms. And it dawned on me that, look, if you have a 56-year-old person, nothing against anyone, 56, if you have a 56-year-old person running something and they know they're going to go on retirement in 4 years, I mean, what you're thinking about, how do I secure my retirement plan? So when you start talking to them about 25 years, they don't even know they're going to be alive, So we need more young, vibrant people who are exposed to these challenges, who would be thinking long-term, knowing very well that in the next 20, 30 years, they will still be alive to see the fruit of their labor. But leadership and leadership.
And what leadership, Folawe, often translates to as well isn't it? I mean, kind of, for example, the headspace for teachers to receive training and support, to perhaps move around to different school districts, have those sort of promotional opportunities. I mean, are those challenges you see in Nigeria?
When I talk about the challenges facing education in Nigeria, I usually say that it's like a jigsaw puzzle. There are like several pieces that are just begging for solutions and begging for ideas to really get to the bottom of it. Like, I think about access as a big issue. Like I shared with you earlier on that in 2013, we had 10.5 million kids out of school. That has now grown to 13.5 million. We still don't have the ideas, we still don't have the leadership, we still don't have the agencies towards addressing this issue. When we look at teacher quality, which is also in that puzzle, teacher quality, for example, like in Nigeria, for you to go into teaching as a profession, there is an examination called the Joint Admissions Matriculation Board. And this examination has to be taken by everyone who wants to go into the university, college as you call it. And it's over 400. And if you want to go into the teaching profession, or if you want to go and study an education degree, all you need to score is 100 or 120 over 400. That is 25%. If you want to go into engineering, doctor, and what have you, you need to score at least 250 and above. So already, the system has designed it in such a way that the bottom of the pyramid are the ones who are attracted into the colleges of education and into the universities to study education. So that's what you have to work with. One of the states in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, northwest Nigeria, recently had the boldness to test his primary school teachers. And 33,000 teachers had to sit to write a grade 4 test. 21,780 teachers failed, and he fired them. And that's just to show you the sort of issues that we're dealing with. So this cuts across not just that state, but all states in Nigeria. So those two key issues, for example, is one that government is trying to grapple with, and everybody's talking about, and they're having all kinds of summits to really look at how do we even train? How do we support these teachers? What do we do? Like, do we fire all of these guys out of the system and bring in new ones? But I think this is where, just as my colleagues have shared, like, leadership is really what will help for the commissioner or the minister to take a decision and say, this is the strategy that I'm going to use to overhaul or revamp the system. And this is not one thing where it's just the Minister of Education talking or having a conversation, but it's the fact that everybody needs to come together and work. There is one thing that stays with me and that I'm constantly sharing, and this is from the the former Minister of Zimbabwe, and who is also on the board of Teach for All, Zingai Mutumbuka. And the guy said one thing. He's usually termed as one of the most successful ministers for education in Africa. And he was asked during an interview, I think it was with Wendy, and he said, why were you termed to be successful? And he said, during his tenure, Zimbabwe had just come out of the civil war. And he said parents, he said the president, he said the Minister for Works, Budget and Planning, Finance, everybody understood the role that education will play in building their nation. So everyone prioritized it. The Minister of Finance knew why it was important to dedicate and allocate a certain amount to education. The parents knew why it was important for them to send their kids to school every day. And so when I think about the sort of solutions that will address this jigsaw puzzle, it's important that we have leadership across all of those pieces and across the ecosystem working together to ensure that we're shaping a better future for children.
What do you think the status is of the teacher as a profession in each of your countries, and how that, what one could do to kind of motivate around that?
When we get onto campuses and we're talking to some of these brilliant young people, we're trying to convince them to come into our programs to become teachers, they latch onto us. The reason they're latching onto us is because we're probably one of the only organizations on campus that are trying to recruit smart individuals to go into the classroom. The only other opportunities they're seeing are coming from the corporate world and so forth. So it is also up to us, the people in the education sector, to make teaching sexy, to make it appealing, and go out there and aggressively recruit this individual, just as what the corporate sector is doing. And then over a period of time, we will be able to shift the trajectory in a positive direction.
I say to people that this leadership program is an experiential leadership development program. The 2 years is just the first step towards this lifelong commitment that they're about to get into. So what you're doing within the 2 years is to ensure that you're helping to change the trajectory of the children that you're placed in front of, but also to engage with the community, engage with the kids, engage with their families, to understand the deeper issues that is keeping them back from being successful. There's one of the fellows who noticed that more than 50% of his kids had to work, throughout the night for them to have a meal the next day. So, for them, they either needed to hawk in the garage where the bosses, load passengers, or they needed to support their mothers in the marketplace after school, etc. But they knew that entrepreneurship skill was a big deal. And so what he did was he invited parents from communities. They had like this parent-teacher association meeting, and they had parents who came together and they identified different skills. There was hairdressing, there was pastry frying, and there was tailoring. And so these parents committed 3 hours a week to come and train the kids in the school on these different vocational skills, ensuring that because of the background that they come from, when these kids leave primary school, when they're leaving their class, they have skills that can allow for them to be self-sufficient. And so all of his kids now, and it's an initiative that he's now incubating in partnership with an organization that we've partnered with called Incubator Africa, where he's now building this into a project that allow for him to engage community to help to train kids on vocational skills within their communities, and that can be relevant.
I want to share Folawe's analogy that she already shares that always inspires me, and also I've seen it inspire me in Uganda. It's like the forest is burning, okay? There's so many problems, and like all this, the habitat is burning, and every animal is running away. Like the lions are running, the monkeys taking off, and everything is running away, and there's this hummingbird, the theory of the hummingbird, and it's running and getting water and just trying to throw it at the fire and running back and tirelessly. And then the elephants with big trunks, you're like, what is this little bird doing, at the end of the day? And so then she says, I'm only doing, my part. I'm here to play my part, and I'm doing what I can with the resources I can. And so I feel like our organizations really are like that hummingbird, really. Like you can't say we can solve the problems of our countries soon, but I believe that if we are like that hummingbird, like right now we are seeing that soon we are getting some other animals to join us by solving the problem, and soon I believe that as we build this pipeline of leaders that we will tackle the problem. But the problem is huge. It's a giant. And that's why we are here. And then also the other question, I look at like 20,000 kids that we are reaching now, and I imagine the future of my country, and I say, 25 years from today, if we don't have leaders in every sector of our country, moral, and adaptive leaders who think about our problems from a very adaptive approach, then I don't see purpose for us to be living. I think that's why for us every day we wake up motivated knowing that if we are adding at least 100 a year or even 20 a year, leaders who have that moral and obligation and adaptive leadership to think about, I'm going to work on these problems for the rest of my life because I want my children and my children's children to have a better future. I think I am inspired to deal with those problems.
Equity is not going to happen by chance. It's going to happen by the efforts, not just efforts of single individuals, but collective efforts that is consensuous and that is deliberate and that is also collaborative. And that's the only way that we're going to achieve equity and justice and freedom in our nation.